Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Wrap. Today, I'm joined by Lucie Child, who is the strategy lead for customer care at the Very Group. Hello, Lucie.
Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. We've just been having a good chat beforehand. So again, I always think maybe I should hit record without you knowing, just as soon as you come on.
I think, yeah, that would have been great. Actually, we've covered a lot already, haven't we?
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Love it.
So one of the things when we were talking about what to cover, and there's some lovely topics that you suggested, and you used a phrase I really like. I think it's even a podcast name, isn't it? It's Squiggly Careers. So let's start with your squiggly career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes, there's definitely a book, isn't there, which I've got on my shelf about squiggly careers, and I think it's a perfect description for mine. So I'm actually really, really new to the world of contact centres, relatively speaking. You know, I know a lot of people who work in the industry have kind of been in it for most of their career, but I actually started with an archaeology degree, which is very random, but was a choice I made because I was really obsessed as a kid with things like myths and legends, and then that developed into a love of particularly like classical Greek architecture. Sound like a real nerd, don't I? But
Love it though. I love that.
Love Greek architecture, love Greek sculpture, and I was kind of faced with, well, do I go to university and do something like, I don't know, because I've done maths at A level, do I do some kind of finance thing that's going to set me up for a great career, or do I do something that I really love? And I went down the really love route, which yeah, which actually I really don't regret. I had a brilliant 3 years. It was fascinating. But I think what it did do is crystallize I probably didn't want to be an archaeologist, because I didn't really enjoy sitting in muddy trenches for days on end, endlessly drawing tiny fragments of things. You know, it wasn't quite what I'd had in mind. But I think also what it did do was help me realize what was important in terms of a bit of, job stability, because you don't get that if you're an archaeologist. There's not really a kind of solid career path. You kind of get short-term contracts and things like that. And it made me think, well, maybe I should go and try and sort of find a meaningful job for a while, get a bit of stability, start earning some money. And what I did do is I realized I was really interested in kind of understanding people. And I got a great job after a few different applications for a few different things, one of which was to be a store manager for a supermarket. I wasn't successful with that one, but then I got a job on a graduate scheme for a global market research agency, which a lot of my friends were like, what on earth, you're going to stand up on a street with a clipboard? And there was a bit of that in the training, but actually it was fascinating. It was kind of 4 or 5 years of really understanding how companies work and what they need to understand about their customers to, I guess, really, it was the start, I suppose, of people understanding how important customer experience was. So we did a lot of things like website usability testing for brands, and things like that. And it was great to work with some big clients. And I got to really understand how to understand people and translate that into kind of what businesses should do with that information. And then I suppose after that, I got to a point, I think everyone gets this, don't they? The grass is always greener. So I saw people going off from the agency to work what we called client side. So going to do the same job, but, commissioning agencies like us. And I did that for a brief period of time with Sainsbury's. And that was great. That was a learning curve. I have to tell you, going into that real kind of corporate world was like eye-opening after a lovely supportive agency where you have this great team and you all pull together to deliver. And there were hard yards in the agency, like staying till midnight sometimes, but getting the pizzas and the beers in and pulling together to deliver for a deadline. Whereas you're thrown into the corporate world and it's you against everyone else. And it was a learning curve, but probably wasn't for me ultimately. And then just randomly out of the blue, I got contacted by a recruiter, and he said to me, what would you like to do? And I said, well, do you know what, I'd love to do what I'm doing now, but for a museum or a gallery or charity, because I'd love to tie it back to my passion and my love for all things kind of historical, cultural, etc. And he kind of looked at me and was like, I don't think many jobs like that exist, to be honest. They probably can't afford to pay for that sort of role, or they'd have contractors or what have you, but we'll keep an eye out. And then he phoned me back literally about a day later going, I don't know how this has happened. You must have manifested this, because I've just seen a job exactly how you've described for English Heritage. I was like, wow, okay, amazing. Applied for it and got it incredibly. It was a new role that they'd set up. There was a new marketing director had come in and had recognised the importance of that kind of role, of that consumer understanding. And I actually stayed there for 12 years, which was great. I learned loads. I got to have meetings in stately homes. I got to go to the solstice at Stonehenge, and I got to help them, with their ambition to grow their membership base. And we got to over 1 million members while I was there, which was a real milestone. Yeah, because the membership's so important to kind of fund the work that they do. They're slightly different to National Trust in that they're kind of a place of last resort or last reserve. So they have a kind of obligation to look after and conserve places for the country. So it was amazing to be able to do that, and they became more commercial while I was there as well, doing kind of more holiday lets and things like that. So yeah, it was a great 12 years. But we moved back home to Liverpool, and I guess as well, after you've been somewhere 12 years, you're probably looking for a bit of a challenge, something a little bit different. And I'd heard great things about the Very Group. I'd had a couple of people I knew worked there, and what they told me about it was, it's a great local employer. It was a place where you could kind of come in, but you would get a lot of opportunity if you wanted it to try something different, try something new. So I applied for a customer insight role there, and I did that for about 4 years, I think it was. But during that time, I got the opportunity to work on a customer experience project. So we worked with an external consultant who brought some great kind of agile techniques in, and I really loved that. I loved that sort of ability to spot a problem and fix it for the customer, and we were given like real autonomy to do that, and I did some great kind of stuff through that. Then I went back to the original role, which was the CI manager, and was working on a project which was to really understand the customer, and we did a kind of proper like longitudinal online qualitative panel, and we produced some really insightful stuff about why customers choose to use Very and the role that we can play in their lives. It's absolutely so fantastic to get that real depth of knowledge and insight. And I had the privilege to kind of go around the business and share that with everybody, so that they could understand how they could use that knowledge and insight about the customer in their own area to make things better. And I presented that to our operations board, and I actually thought it was a joke at first when the director said to me, everybody needs to see this. It's so powerful. It's so interesting. He said, how do you fancy a trip to South Africa? I thought he was joking, kind of laughed it off. But what came of that was me spending 2 weeks in South Africa, sharing that insight about our customer with our colleagues. So our colleagues who were taking the calls with our customers day in, day out, and really bringing it to life for them. And I just, oh my goodness, I fell in love with South Africa. I fell in love with the South African people, and I fell in love with contact centres and operations, and the rest is history. I was like, right, I need to work in this team, and I did. So shortly afterwards, I applied for this role and was fortunate enough to get it, and I've not looked back. I feel like I am where I've probably always supposed to have been. It's just taken me 20 years to get here. So yeah, that's the Squiggle in a nutshell.
What a lovely career though, and I think all the way through that, your sort of passion for it, for me, it's like, if you take away the word consumer and customer, it's just understanding human behavior and why we interact with each other, with brands, with when we get things. I love that. And it's interesting, isn't it, that when you talk about kind of insight and sharing it with the whole team, I know from my background, if you can make the activity tangible and based on what it does for people and their lives and feelings, it makes the job of frontline people so much more meaningful. Because I think the danger is that you start getting to the point where you treat customers as kind of passing things on a conveyor belt, like in a factory, rather than where is your interaction with them in the day in their life, and what does it do when they have finished that interaction? How do they feel? And for your work to be shared with everyone, I think is brilliant.
It was so powerful, and you're so right, because I think bringing that connection, to especially our colleagues over in South Africa, and being able to kind of bring the day-to-day life of the customer to life for them in a powerful way. It was all kind of video kind of style, and it was great to be able to share that, why are customers so upset when the kid's bike doesn't arrive for their birthday, the impact that has on their life, or actually how critical it is if someone's washing machine breaks down and they've got kind of 3 or 4 kids, and the washing's piling up, and they haven't got the cash right now to be able to buy a new one. So their ability to spread the cost and get one straight away, the difference that makes in a customer's life, it was just really, it was so powerful. And I just feel, like you say, just me making it meaningful just really helps that colleague to do their job. Absolutely.
What was it about South Africa and the South African people that you kind of fell in love with?
Oh, it was just such a warmth and such an energy I felt from absolutely like touching down in the airport, and it was everybody I came into contact with, and it kind of felt weirdly, you felt at home, and people had kind of said to me, oh gosh, you're going to South Africa, oh right, and I think people were variously a bit worried, or they didn't understand, or they'd heard things, and I kind of tried not to think about any of that. And I got there with a bit of an open mind, and honestly, from the minute I interacted with anyone, I realized that was all nonsense, really. It was just such a lovely place to be, very, very welcoming, very warm. And from the minute I stepped into the contact center as well, everyone was just so approachable and helpful, and it was like being at home, even though you were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away from home. It very much, I don't know. Don't think I've got a very strong accent, but I'm a Scouser, and it felt very kind of the same sort of vibe as well that you get in Liverpool. Somehow, really, anyone will talk to anyone, and anyone will welcome you, and you'll find a connection no matter what your differences are. You'll find something in common. I think my favourite moment was when some of the girls took me under their wing and decided to teach me all of the South African slang, like what the words were for like hangovers and things like that. I just loved it. It was brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in Turkey and having a similar feeling, and also a similar experience where the first things I were taught were all the wrong, let's say, Turkish words.
Yes,
everything came with a warning. Don't say this in a restaurant. Don't say this to our boss. Okay.
I think you feel like you've been accepted, don't you, when you have those conversations? Definitely. Yeah.
And I also think we spoke about this briefly before we hit record, was just around, if you look back at, because you prompted me to think about all of the guests that have been on, if you think about how people have arrived, I think we should just really state now, like normalize that people arrive via different routes, and there is no kind of, you have to have been on the phones, you have to have done this in a contact center to be able to have a voice, add value, excel in your role. People arrive, isn't that what we love about the contact center industry? It's very inclusive. So it should be inclusive from a career standpoint as well.
Absolutely, I love that take on it completely, and it's interesting because I don't think anybody ever made me feel like that in our team, or when I was in South Africa. I think it was me that came with that preconception of, oh gosh, I've not had that experience. I've got to Google what AHT means or shrinkage means when someone mentions it in a meeting, because I don't know, or even wrap, getting out of wrap, what does that mean? But I think you're absolutely right. People bring so many different varied abilities and things like that. We should absolutely be so diverse in who we bring into our into our world, and so welcoming and accepting, for sure.
And I said to you, didn't I, before as well, even though I was started on the phones, I've sat in meetings as a manager when someone's been explaining shrinkage, and I've just been nodding, going, yeah, we definitely need to action that, thinking, I can't remember what it is. What is it again?
No, absolutely. And everyone has their own meaning for words as well, don't they? And your shrinkage might be different to my shrinkage. But no, absolutely. I still have to do it now. Don't tell anyone. I still have to do it 2.5 years in. I have to Google things.
And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with that, because we're all bringing our own self and our own experiences to our roles, and that's the beauty of it. I think that why we love being in this industry. And we touched upon something that I know you're very passionate about, and that is diversity and inclusion. And what did you set up at the Very Group?
So I set up, it's called WAVE, which stands for Women at Very, and it's actually started as something, and it's now become something slightly different. It started very much for me as a network, as a place for women to connect with each other, to share challenges, support each other, seek advice, feedback. And I think the two overriding things I really wanted to get from it is I wanted us to broaden our network, because at the time, as I was saying, this is before I joined customer care. I worked in a fairly male-dominated team, so I wanted to broaden my network within the business. I wanted to meet more women who were doing different roles, wanted to understand what those roles entailed and how they got there, and I wanted to give other women the opportunity to do the same thing. So I wanted to provide a way of connecting, and I wanted to, I guess, be each other's cheerleaders. That's the kind of phrase that we landed on when we were trying to describe what we wanted to achieve from it. And that's how it started. And what it's still that, it's very much that still now, but it's kind of turned into as well is a little bit of a, I'll say a little bit, that's diminishing it, very much an agent for positive change as well. So not just that support network, but a sort of holding the mirror up to the business, challenging. One of the things we've done recently is we had some listening groups with our members that we invited our exec board into, so they all attended a session and listened and kind of understood what the barriers are to female talent, and then they all came up with a commitment or a pledge that they shared as part of International Women's Day about what they'd heard, which was a real step up from being a network into a kind of network plus, if you like. So it's really changed in that 2 years, and I set it up just before lockdown, really. So we kind of had a few things that were in person. We had a few events, and then most of it has had to be virtual, which has proved quite challenging, but actually has provided us with some real, like any business, I guess, some real opportunity to do things differently and to think about things from a different angle. It's given us the opportunity to grow our membership from different sites as well that we have. Laura, who looks after our contact centre in South Africa, she's been able to join. We've got members now from our fulfilment operation down in the East Midlands, but we've also been able to kind of connect with other people virtually as well. So it's really helped, but it has provided some challenges. And now we're in that whole, well, how do we make it now work in a hybrid way? But it's been phenomenal. It's been such a such a great source of joy to me over the time, but also I've seen that what it's done to help other people as well, and to help connect. One of the things we've done through lockdown, we started having what we call water coolers, where you can signpost that you're interested in a water cooler, and every month you'll get matched with someone else from the network, and you go off and have a virtual coffee with them. So I think there's well over, I think it's about 150 people now in the water cooler movement. So every month, that's 75 conversations going on between two people who didn't know each other before, who probably would have never met each other or come across each other before. So it's really become a bit of a movement.
Right. How did it so you didn't really this involvement from a support and a network to driving some positive change, is that just a natural kind of addition, like you say, or did you have that in mind when you started?
I think I really had the connection bit in mind when I started, really, the kind of connection, the support, the cheerleading aspect. And I think what's come of that, it's almost been a natural evolution. I think as we've talked about some stuff we've got angry about and we've kind of gone, well, actually, instead of sitting here going, well, how can I help you through that? Actually, it's like, well, how can I help make this not happen for you, or make this not happen for somebody else in future, or how can we normalize talking about these things? So a lot of the stuff we've covered has been things like menopause or fertility or baby loss. And I think one of the things I'm most proud about is the fact that through having a safe space where we can share that sort of stuff, we've kind of come to the conclusion, well, we shouldn't be sharing it just behind closed doors. We should be normalizing that these things happen to lots of people in the workplace, and that we should be looking at how we can make it better to go through an experience like that at work, and how we can support people to help other people go through those things. So I think that's one of the things that's happened. I think the other thing that's happened is we've listened to the members. So people have got involved and said, I've got involved in this because I kind of identified that this is a great thing to get involved with, but actually I want to make a difference. And it's kind of started off as me running it, and then it had a few more helpers, and then we formalized into a committee. And if you talk to all the committee, the reason they're there on the committee is that they want to make a difference. So I think those kind of things have fueled that change.
I think it's brilliant what you're doing. I think it's great, and it's just the power of people and actually trying to get things done. Because for me, through doing the podcast and some of the guests that have come on, that awareness, if I'd have had that earlier on in my career, I know it would have made me a better leader of people as well, so because you think, even if you're open-minded and have a growth mindset, that you're caring and inclusive of people in your team. But then hearing about things, for me, it was hearing about the menopause from Sarah, and just going, oh my God, my first, when I was a team leader, I think half of my first team were women in the age group where that was probably happening. And as a 22, 23-year-old, I had no idea, and I think if that had been part of my training, it would have made me a better leader. It would have made me be able to help, this kind of servant leadership, isn't it? You're there to support your team through everything that they're going through. So even just in that small example, your group is actually making a real positive difference. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think we are really proud of that. Those sorts of things, those normalizing things. I think it's so important. And it's like you say, menopause, it's such a taboo subject. It's so strange why it is. But virtually all of us were saying, well, our mums never talked to us about it when it was happening to them. So how would we even know? And we're the ones who are going to go through it at some point. And so if we don't even know about it, haven't been talked to about it, how about everyone else? They wouldn't either. And there was a lady on we had a really big session. I think it was over 100 people joined it, and the lady in the chat, it was anonymous chat, said, well, I'm going through it now and I've not even talked to my husband about it. And you just think, gosh, it's so why we need to really, really shake this up and change this, because you shouldn't have to go through stuff like that on your own. If you want to, obviously it's your choice, but you shouldn't have to. You should have that support, because it's tough, isn't it? So I'm glad that we're normalizing those kind of conversations.
Definitely. Did you envisage it would be like this when you started? The whole wave?
Not at all. I think this is a piece of advice definitely worth sharing. I kind of ummed and ahed for a long time about even starting it, and I talked to a few different people, and I always found an excuse not to do it. And it's funny, I saw your LinkedIn post this morning, kind of similar vibe, isn't it, of kind of, if you're thinking about doing something, just go for it, because you're never going to be ready. You're never going to have all the answers. You're never going to get it perfect or even right half the time. And I distinctly remember a conversation with a lady who said to me, what are you waiting for? Just do it. And I was like, okay. And I went back to my desk and I just sent a meeting invite to all the women I knew that might be interested. And I said, right, meet in the canteen next Wednesday, whatever it was, and let's see what we can do. And I think there were 9 of us at that time, and now I think we're kind of 400 strong. So
isn't that amazing though?
I know, I'd never imagined it would be that big, but now it's funny, isn't it? Because now we're at this stage, I'm like, right, it's not big enough, we're not doing enough yet. The kind of ambition is still burning there to make it even better. And I think the other thing I'm kind of, I never really envisaged was the fact that there's been a bit of a spin-off as well. So we've now got, recently we've got Rave, which is Race at Ferry as well. And there's an LGBT plus network. And there's PAVE as well, which is Parents at Ferry. So it's kind of had that knock-on effect of kind of opening the doors for other networks as well. And there's loads of intersectionality between the networks. We do loads of stuff together, we support each other, and that's just brought new friendships into my life. It's brought new kind of understanding for me as well about things. So it's had loads of unintended consequences I could never foreseen at the beginning.
We all love community, don't we? We all love coming together, and I think that kind of, I can imagine before your first meeting thinking so many thoughts going through your head. What's it going to be like? What if people don't like it? Have I got enough space? All of these different things. There's probably people listening now that have thought, oh, I wish we had something similar, or I've thought about doing something similar. And your message is right, is just get going, just start, and know that it's not going to be perfect from the start. It shouldn't be. It would be weird if it was.
Absolutely. And it wouldn't, like you mentioned growth mindset before, you've got to have that mindset that you're going to learn and you're going to develop, and things are going to go in different directions or take tangents that you weren't expecting. Absolutely. 100%. Just start, just do it. There'll be loads of things going through your head. I think the other thing is as well is be kind of open and seek opportunity to understand and learn from others, because one thing that really helped me was I posted it on LinkedIn, a picture of that first meeting, and then out of the blue, a lady who'd done something similar at a different business contacted me, and she said, I'd love to share my learnings with you, because I made loads of mistakes, the things I wished I'd known at the beginning, which I didn't, and I'd love to share them with you. And it was amazing. And I can't say that we didn't make the same mistakes, but her words of wisdom and her guidance really helped. They really, really shaped some of the things that we did. So, there's always people out there who are willing to share and help and give you advice if you need it. So absolutely reach out for that as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because whilst you probably had some initial targets, it's often people get fixated with, because I remember when I started doing this, one of the common questions was, what's your target? What's the destination? And in a simple way, I'd say, well, there isn't really. The first one was just get it up and running. The second is just keep going. I don't really have an end goal. and it's that the concept of just enjoying the progress, and it's the doing of it that is the thing where you get the joy from, rather than there being this, I'm going to this target, when I get there, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely relate to that. I think, yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know with Wave what the target is, what the aim is, and I think you're right. I think you have to be really enjoying it. It has to be giving you energy to be able to kind of carry on, because it takes a lot, doesn't it? It takes a lot of must take a lot of your personal commitment and time to deliver this. But you must be getting something back from it in order to make that kind of, you want to carry on with it, really.
Completely in the same, and it's nothing like kind of, I can't imagine what it's like to think. Sometimes you catch yourself going, there's 400 people in this now, and you're making positive change, and isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it really is. But it's funny because there's little moments, there's little tiny moments that stand out, to you that remind you why it's really worthwhile, and I kind of cling on to those a little bit, really, when it's, because it is tough sometimes. It's hard to keep that energy all the time, and it's hard to find the time outside of work and other things. So yeah, you just have to kind of remind yourself of like all the positivity that's coming out of this, and all of the, I hope for me, it's still those personal moments. It's if you help one person to understand what they're going through is not unusual, or that they're not alone, or you've helped somebody to make a connection which might open the next door for them into a new role or whatever. It's those sorts of things that really, really matter to me, and still, did at the beginning and still do now. So.
And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said some of it is about awareness, because I think, and I know that when I've spoken about this before, other people have said they thought the same. I think I was a bit complacent about our industry, but I thought, because I've worked for more female bosses than men, I've had more peers that have been women than men. You kind of think that problem exists outside of contact centres, but then when you actually speak to people, that isn't the case at all. And so these types of groups, I think, are great, because you are driving real change, and that starts with awareness, education, understanding. I found out so much just from speaking to people like you. The Everyday Sexism Project, you only have to read that website for like half an hour, and you're like, holy moly, this is, I can't even imagine what it's like to be subjected to these kind of like microaggressions all day long. Because it's not been my reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting, isn't it, with things like microaggressions? Sometimes I think you just become not immune, but it's just life. So you're just almost accepting of that. And I think you need that disruption to go, actually, no, this isn't okay, this isn't right. And it sounds really weird to say that out loud, but I think you do get to that position sometimes where it's just, you're just accepting of it, because it's just what you've always encountered. And like I say, it's not until you start reading, I think that's where it started for me, to be perfectly honest. I went to a few kind of seminars, like sort of that women were leading, and I read some books. I started reading some really interesting literature, and it's just that educating yourself, really understanding, and that's what fuels you and gets you like, actually, yeah, this isn't enough, this isn't right, this isn't how I want the world I want to create for my kids or my friends or whatever. So yeah,
more power to you. And another subject that I loved that you wanted to talk about was mental health, and in particular OCD. Why was it that you wanted to talk about this?
I think for me, it goes back to what I was saying before about normalizing things and making it okay to talk about things, because I experienced this. So it's about 15 years ago now, I received a diagnosis of OCD, and probably a lot of people who might listen to this won't know this about me. So this kind of, this is kind of stepping into a bit of brave territory for me, but in fact, it was really hard. It was a really hard time in my life. I found like really normal day-to-day stuff really tricky. But what was most tricky was that nobody talked about it. It wasn't a thing. Nobody really understood it. People still do now use the term OCD in kind of, a really flippant way. And and the hardest thing was, and I wasn't working for Very at the time, was that it was really brushed under the carpet at work as well. I did talk to my boss about it, who was supportive, but his kind of advice was, you probably don't want to be sharing this really widely because it might harm how people think of you and things like that. And looking back now, that was a real barrier to progressing and getting better. And it was also really hard to not see anyone else who was going through it, because it made me feel really weird and abnormal and all of this sort of stuff. And I know now how common it is and how loads of people suffer from it. And I just thought this is a great platform to just again open up that conversation, just be really open and say, it's not weird, it's not abnormal. If you're going through something like that, there's loads of people who are, and there's loads of help and support as well. So I think that was why I put that on our kind of topic list, really.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for sharing it and for bringing it up. You know, when you said you kind of got that diagnosis, what had led up to that point in terms of, you know, how you were feeling?
Yeah.
And when you got it, was it helpful?
Yeah. So what led up to it was, for me, it started with like really, really intrusive thoughts. It was very thought based at the time. And again, I know this now, but I didn't know at the time there's different types of OCD. So some of it is kind of purely the obsessive thoughts, and some of it is where you have the behavioural side of it as well, which leads to the kind of the compulsive element of it. I was having lots and lots of really intrusive thoughts. I couldn't kind of sleep. I couldn't, you know, I'd get fixated on things, which meant I couldn't really think about the stuff I was supposed to be doing. So day-to-day life. And I think fortunately for me, this was before I had kids. So I don't know how it must be so hard if you're, and I know people who do suffer when they, you know, when they've got babies and things like that. And it's really, really difficult. But and then it kind of led to sort of, so one of the key things for me was about, I was kind of obsessed with this idea of harming people, and that I was harming people unintentionally, but I had harmed them and not realised. So it led to lots of really strange behaviour. Like if I drove anywhere, I might have to do the same drive about 3 or 4 times because I was convinced I'd knocked somebody over, and I needed to go back and make sure I hadn't. And then I thought, well, what if I did that second time I went? So I'd have to go back again. And I think there was, another example I can remember is I was trying on some clothes in a shop, and none of them were right, none of them fitted. But I ended up having to buy all of them because I thought, well, if I put these back into circulation and someone buys them, they'll get really sick because they've worn the same thing that I've worn. And when things like that happened, I was just like, right, I do need some help now. My boyfriend, who is now my husband, at the time was so supportive, but there's only so much one person can do. And then that led to me thinking, oh, I'm going to contaminate him because he's going to start getting the same thoughts that I have because I'm in close proximity to him. And I think it was at that point we both realised we needed some sort of external support. I think it did really help getting a diagnosis in some respects. But the hardest thing was that the doctor said to me, there isn't a cure for this. And hearing that was like, am I going to feel like this for the rest of my life? Because I genuinely don't think I can carry on if I feel like this for the rest of my life. But what he meant was, you can't just take some pills and it'll go away. You have to work on what's causing it, and you have to develop your resilience, and you have to recognize what triggers it for you, and all of that. And at the time that sounded like really hard work when you're exhausted from the thoughts. But I'm, you know, it's very rare now that I get reoccurrences of it. I do still sometimes, but I really absolutely recognise what's going to set it off, and I absolutely recognise what I need to do for myself to make that less likely. So, you know, really good sleep, really good exercise, looking after myself, not getting too stressed, but also, you know, talking to the thoughts really helps as well. So if you recognise that thought's coming back, you're like, okay, hi, I hear you, you're an obsessive thought, you can just jog on. And it sounds really stupid, but you develop your own little mechanisms to deal with it. So yeah, gosh, I didn't really expect to get so into that, but I just really hope that anyone who is having anything like this can kind of take some sort of some comfort from knowing that you can move through it, and there's loads of support there. But again, normalizing it's dead normal. It's so normal to have these kind of issues with mental health, especially now after everything that everyone's gone through. I just feel like there's such a tidal wave coming our way of mental health problems, and I just really hope that everyone who needs it can get the support that they need to deal with it.
I can thank you so much. I can guarantee you that someone listening will benefit from hearing you say this, because it's the thing about it, it keeps coming up, doesn't it? It's about perception. So people will look at you, you're a senior leader, you're successful, you run other groups and you do volunteer work and all of these things, and no one would associate that with the perception of mental health and having a mental health challenge, because I imagine there's a version of you right now, maybe in a contact center, who thinks that the crippling aspect of having that mental health challenge will stop them gaining or progressing through life in a happy way and reaching a happy place, because they think, well, you don't know because you haven't got what's in my head. And hearing you say that, and recognizing that it takes work and support and all of those things, but you can get through it, I think will be so powerful.
Oh, I hope so. That use of the word crippling is so right. That is exactly what it's like. It's so all encompassing, and it just makes normal stuff really hard. Like the idea of getting out of bed and making a cup of tea, just the thought of that, it's like, I just can't. And I really hope, and the offer is so genuine. And if anyone it does want to talk to me, I'm absolutely there, and I can give the benefit whatever of the experience. I would be so happy to do that if anyone wants to reach out. Honestly, a really, really genuine offer there.
That's lovely. And you said something at the start, actually, that I think when you said it, I kind of heard, I thought, oh God, and I'm sure other people listening did as well, about the flippant nature with which OCD, the kind of perception that's born around it from either films or whatever, and you just think, oh God. And it's an awareness. The more we talk about it, the more aware we can become to break down something that isn't true. Well, not isn't true, but isn't in any way reflective of what you went through.
Yes, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, if people say it, it doesn't really, I'm like, whatever, it's fine, it's not a real big issue. But I think it doesn't help to sort of validate those feelings for people who are going through it, that it did. It's not just about, I need to make sure my kitchen's tidy before I go to work. It's not that, and that's how people use it. It is that kind of real crippling kind of sensation. So yeah, like you say, it's just awareness. You can't expect everyone to know about everything. We just need to keep talking, don't we, and keep helping each other.
We do. And I think we need to, for me, the next step is, I saw a post on LinkedIn. It was a lovely visual, and it had like the screen split in half. On the left-hand side, the heading was physical illness, and it had flowers, a get well soon card, chocolates, and then on the right-hand side it had mental illness, and there was just it was just blank.
Oh, gosh,
and it was just that kind of, I think we're far more accepted and we've progressed so much as a society, yet I still think, and I know it happens every day, people will be off, and maybe now they feel comfortable enough, hopefully, to be able to say, this is a mental health reason that I'm off.
Yeah.
But you will get, I'm sure, people kind of rolling their eyes, going, oh, really? Can you not just come in? Where you wouldn't say that at all if it was a physical illness. So I still think we have a ways to go.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's hard, isn't it? I think it's really hard to relate if you've not been through that yourself. You've not experienced that. I understand it's hard to sort of see that and understand what it's like, understand how hard it is to do stuff when you're feeling like that. And so the only way that we can help people understand is by sharing our stories, you know, as hard and as kind of personal as they are. I think that's got to go some way to helping people to kind of at least visualize it.
Completely, because I think right now you're evidencing and showing that you're a role model, because someone can look at you and go, well, Lucy has had this and she's still done this. And it's happened time and time again on the podcast, whether it's postnatal depression or depression or anxiety. Lots of people have come on and I think bravely talked about their experiences to show people listening that there is always hope and there is always a solution. It's you're not stuck.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that whole, and I think that was definitely how I felt, that stuck. I did genuinely think, am I going to feel like this forever? And I think I said it before, I don't think I can carry on feeling like this forever, and that's a really horrible, dark place to be, and you wouldn't want anyone to feel like that. You'd absolutely want them to know that there will come a day when you won't feel like this and it won't be this hard. And I think that's the message, isn't it? That's the message you want everyone to hear, because that's so important.
Did the other subject that you mentioned, which was kind of creativity, did that feature at all as part of coming through that?
Yeah, I think so. It's always been a part of my life. I mentioned, and I love kind of architecture and sculpture. My dad's actually my dad's a painter, so I've always grown up with, you know, that around me. And even now, I think when I'm getting, it sounds silly, but when I am recognizing those kind of triggers are happening for me, reaching for the iPad and doing a happy color as kind of silly as it sounds, is really helpful, because it just gives you that something to focus on and something to lose yourself in, that's completely outside of what's going on in your head, you know. So I think it absolutely did. It's always been a source of great kind of joy to me, and I think the other thing that really helped was getting out into the fresh air, getting out into nature. And for me, a little technique is getting making myself feel really small, which sounds silly. So going and standing on an empty beach. I'm really fortunate. I live like 10-minute walk from the beach, so standing on an empty beach and just looking out at the endless sea and across at the sand, and you realize that there's so much else out there, and there's so much else going on, and what's happening in your head right now is a tiny thing, and there's just so much else to be joyful about and to kind of recognize and to see. But yeah, creativity is a huge part, and I kind of I've always wanted to sort of kind of make that more and more of a part of my life. So I've actually been working on a colouring book. I've been making my own colouring book, because I've found a lot of help and from the mindfulness colouring books and the happy colour and that sort of thing, and I've wanted to try and sort of create my own version of that. So yeah, like going back to the earlier thread of just do it, just do something. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I'm actually almost at a point now where I'm going to get it made. I've got print quotes of someone lovely, serendipitous contact through LinkedIn has designed a cover for me and a logo, and I'm almost ready to go. So
how cool is that?
I'm so excited, but I'm in my own way at the moment. I need to get out of my own way, because I've got one last drawing to finish, and I don't know, it's the hardest bit, isn't it? That last 1% is the hardest bit. So as soon as I've done that, I'm going to unleash it on the world and see what happens.
I can't wait.
I'll send you a copy.
I cannot wait. I think it's brilliant, and I'm a firm believer in like I've mentioned before a couple of times. It's probably about 7-8 years ago now. I was depressed. I had some things going on in my life that led to me being depressed. And one of the things that helped me get out was just, I went down to the range, I think, and just bought a load of canvases and spray paints and just started messing about. And then it became something that you can just feel when you need to do it, you know, and then you start. It's the same as anything. The first ones would just, you know, there's no, you can't judge art, I guess, but the first ones I look back at now and go, did I really do that? That's just, I don't know what it is. But then you find a way, and you can just again, it's the process of doing it was just something that it kind of cleared my head. Things just, without even thinking about it, things just came out. And whether that is, you know, designing coloring books or spray painting or sculpture or going outside, it just finding something is the way out for sure, or part of the way out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to be your thing, hasn't it? It's got to be the thing that does it for you, because colouring books are probably not going to do it for some people, but they'll find the thing that gives them that awakens something in them and kind of helps to clear the, you know, the other stuff that's going on, at least for a bit, just give you that brain space to think about something else.
I really look forward to that coming out. You've got to let me know when it is. I'm sure I'll see it on LinkedIn. Make sure you push it out there. Lucie, it's been lovely chatting to you. I thank you so much for sharing your own journey, the group, and the challenge of OCD. I know you would have helped people. It's been inspirational to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, Martin. Thank you so much. I've loved every minute of it. It's been a real pleasure. So thanks for asking me.
No problem at all, Lucie. Thanks very much.